Live streaming is on.
Hello, Global Theater. My name is Jerry Fielka. Today is July 16, 2021. Thank you, Clint Ignatoff. You'll be back with us soon, and we appreciate all your help. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here with Jane Davis. Thank you so much, Jane.
My pleasure.
First question is, what's the best thing for a human being?
Oh, to be alive.
We've been studying that word, life, and the noun life and the verb live. What an amazing thing. I agree with you. What's your favorite form of information, how it comes into you?
I'm going to confess, I looked at some of your previous interviews, so I just heard this question, so I had a second to think about it. And I think my favorite way is through my senses.
Yeah. Senses is a great word. And that's the interesting thing. You know, I've been doing it for like 30, 40 years, interviewing people. And at the beginning, I didn't sort of want them to be able to read the questions in advance, you know, just so it'd be fresh. And then some people would go, well, one important artist demanded he get the questions up front. And I was, you know, I made the exception. And then he said, oh, I didn't even read them. And then now it's like anyone can see him. So it's fine that you think about him. Now, that's really important, the five senses. I like that. Now, do you believe in five senses or more senses? How do you define senses?
I never thought about having more. I just accepted that definition. But maybe, you know, sixth sense. Yeah, maybe there are things we can't really understand. So how do you define senses? Ways we perceive things?
Yeah.
That work?
That works really good because perception is really what this series is about, as opposed to conception. And it's more like what your hunch is, what your intuition is.
Nice.
You know, your impulse, like to just suppose. Like when I asked my mom, can I interview you? She said, yeah, but all my answers might be different the next day. I says, well, that's all right.
I like her.
Why do you think humans collect or gather information?
Well, initially to survive, right? So you had to know that the dinosaur was going to come and eat you if you didn't collect information about where he might be. And then I guess it probably got hardwired, a need to collect it. I think it's survival, maybe still survival.
Yeah, because that was interesting. It's like, is this innate in humans to survive? You think it's hardwired in us to survive?
Biologically, don't you think? Yes.
Yeah.
Sure, to reproduce and continue the species, right?
Yep. It's good. So, do thoughts create emotions?
Oh, do thoughts create emotions? Oh, yes, they could.
Yeah.
Yeah. It could go the other way too, right?
Yep. And how would you fill in the blank? I don't know what I think until I.
Oh. Say it out loud.
Nice. Well, that's funny because, you know, Joan Didion says, I don't know what I think until I've written it.
Oh, nice.
And McLuhan says, I don't know what I think until I've said it.
Nice.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you think your observations of human beings, just in general, I know it's both. Some of these beginning questions are both, and it depends, but just again, what you suppose or guess at. Do you think humans are more thinking beings or more feeling beings?
Probably feeling.
Yeah.
Oh, strongly with feeling.
Yeah. Do you more pursue happiness or more pursue meaning?
Happiness.
Yeah.
Easy.
Yeah. Does the brain more detect consciousness or create it? Like, is consciousness there bubbling away and we're just detecting it, or are we actually creating it?
Do we create consciousness? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, do we create
No.
it, or is it already there and
Well,
we're just
no, I think it's
detecting it?
already there, but we can encourage it and foster it.
Yeah, good verbs. You can encourage and foster consciousness. Good. What's faster, speed of light or speed of thought?
Thought? I don't know, but I'll go with that.
Yeah. Well, there's no right or wrong answers,
Yeah.
but that one you got right, Jane. You know, the great poet Audre Lorde said, you can't dismantle the master's house using the master's tools.
Ooh.
And Yvonne Rainer said, you can if you expose the tools. What new tool do you suggest?
So this is like a whole thing about racism and
Well, it could be. It's really up to you to put the
yeah,
questions into the context you
yeah.
want. So it's really more like, what new tool do you like? Do you use, or do you want to use? Or is there any tools that when you, whatever means you want to use them for is fine. You can explain that, but
Okay, I'm just going to say you need to not ignore the old tools. Why not use them if they're there? Maybe use them for a different purpose, use them in a different way.
yeah, that's good. So are you more afraid of new ideas or more afraid of old ideas?
Um, I'm not sure I'm afraid of ideas.
Yeah,
Um,
that's fine. Yeah.
okay.
What do you worry about when you go to bed at night?
Oh, health
Health. Yeah.
and planet, but more health. It gets more personal.
Yep. So Marshall McLuhan learned from the poet Ezra Pound that artists are like the antenna of the race. So the artists, the filmmakers, the writers are broadcasting and um, receiving the hidden psychic effects of art. Like they're telling us what our not art, what our inventions are doing to us. So they're sort of like the artists are telling us about our inventions. Like Joyce, we share a fondness for Finnegan's Wake, and we know that Joyce sat in Paris in the 20s and listened to shortwave radio and wrote it all down. So it was sort of like this information overload from the radio. He put it in a book form. And so that we could sort of maybe suss out what electricity and radio is doing to us.
Mhm.
And so McLuhan's main percept was we can look to the artists to broadcast these hidden psychic effects of our inventions, but we still ignore them. Why do humans still ignore, even though we can turn to the artist to reveal?
Right. Well, it's a comfort level. It's scary and it's it hurts,
Yeah.
it's almost like painful. It's so much easier to just sit and have a beer and watch TV, right?
That was well put. Uh, It is. I get that answer, fear and scary. I like how you put it though. What sit at home, drink a beer, and watch TV. Wow. I think that's what Finnegan's Wake was about too.
Yeah, I do. I do too.
I know you one thing I like is your enthusiasm for realizing that reading the Wake out loud with a group of people is fun.
Right.
It's really fun, and people maybe put too much into it that it's
Yeah.
really just this amazing. It is a tool for us understanding what reading does to us, what reading clubs do to us, and what printed word does to us.
Yeah, it's more fun with you there.
Oh, thank you. Can you conjure up your earliest memory or one of them?
Um, yeah, I remember being at home. I think I might have been preschool and kind of like listening to the radio. The radio was on a lot, soap operas. Yeah, that would be one of my earliest memories.
Wow. In what city was that?
Cleveland. Well, really, we lived outside in the country, town called Willoughby Hills. Very country.
Willoughby Hills, great. I've been to Rushsylvania, Ohio.
I never heard of that. Are you serious?
I'm serious. We have friends in Ohio. I love it. It's beautiful,
Yeah,
beautiful countryside.
yeah.
I'm from Michigan, so it's similar Midwest.
Hmm.
So do you think memory is more a curse or more a blessing?
Blessing.
Yeah. Can you tell me, please, an early role model, someone who had an impact on you within your immediate family, and what specifically was that impact?
Yeah, it's hard to choose between my mother and father, who I was an only child, so that was all what I had.
But
But
you could say, what'd you get from your mom and what'd you get from your dad?
yeah, yeah, my mom, she loved beauty and nature, and she spent a lot of time with me. We would have fun together. We would have snowball fights. She could be silly. And music, she played the piano, introduced me to a lot of music and poetry also. And my father was extremely artistic. He was an artist. And fishing, he taught me how to fish, did a lot of outdoor stuff. He encouraged a lot of creativity. They both did, but he primarily.
Well, that was great. Your mom, you had snowball fights with your mom. Did you
Mhm.
say that? That was great because I asked one time I talked to Marshall McLuhan's son, Eric McLuhan, about saying my lecture I was proposing was interactive. So I would try to keep the people I'm lecturing to as involved as me and not just them being a spectator. And so he says it's an interactive workshop. And he goes, well, what interactive is if someone throws a snowball at me, I'm going to throw a snowball back at them.
Right. Yeah.
In what medium did your dad work in as an artist?
He painted, he drew, he started drawing cartoons when he was in college, humorous cartoons, for the humor. He started the humor magazine. Then as he retired, he was in business and he was a lawyer. And when he retired, he did a lot of painting.
Nice. He had a
Yeah,
good sense of humor. So
yeah,
then early in your life, Jane, someone outside your immediate family who had an impact on you, and what was that impact?
right. I had a best friend and she was Irish, which I think is what started drawing me toward Irish literature when I look back. But
Yeah.
she was a tomboy, which I wasn't, and we were together, we were just together all the time. And so she was a definite influence. And her family, being in her family, in her house.
Yeah. But you said she was a tomboy and you weren't, or
I
you
was
both?
no, I wanted to be indoors reading a book.
Right. So I'm glad you had ESP. I wanted to get back to reading for a
Okay.
second. Did you pick up reading because your parents were reading as an example, or they were saying, let's go to the library, we're encouraging you to read, or on your own?
I was an early reader. I read, I think, before I started first grade. We had a lot of books, and my mother read to me.
Yeah.
The thing to be done,
Yeah.
and I loved it.
Yeah. But who would you say early on made the impact on you to really encourage you to keep reading? What did you know?
I can't even remember because it was always such a part of me, like eating or sleeping.
Yeah,
I just read
right.
uh, the point where my mother would make me go outdoors.
Really?
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah,
Um, did you have any then what's your through line? Did you go to college?
yeah.
And what did you study in college?
English.
And so, but tell me maybe two or three writers early in college who were having an impact on you.
Wow. Early in college.
Or any time in your
Yeah, yeah.
education. Or high school, college,
Y-
anywhere,
You
like
know,
more so.
stuff like, do you remember Marjorie Morningstar? Loved that. Um, what's the other one? The classic thing about the South, Margaret Mitchell, Gone with
Yeah,
the Wind, Gone with the Wind.
Gone with the Wind, yeah,
Herman Wouk, however you say it. I read
yeah,
him because those were
right.
some of those were books in the house.
But that was the question is too more so, were you being drawn more to the books that you were required in your classes, or more so to books that you got on your own?
I did both.
Both, yeah.
Both. Because I took courses in things that I really liked.
Yeah.
Art.
Did your parents raise you a particular religion?
Jewish. Although
Did are
not
you,
like secular Jewish. They didn't
right.
believe anything, but
Yeah.
they sent me to Sunday school for my grandmother's sake.
And are you still practicing in any
Yeah.
way cultural? Yeah.
Yeah, and we belonged to a synagogue, and we were active, and not really going to services, but kind of socially.
Yeah. They sometimes say that's culturally Jewish.
That'll work, yeah.
Yeah. And then do you pray?
I'm not sure. If I do, it's not, I mean, I'll say the prayers if I'm in services, but in my head, I might say something, but they might call it prayer.
Yeah.
I really call it prayer, sort of.
I like that. Do you pray? I'm not sure. I've never had that answer, and it's so good because you're like, okay. So Jane, if God does exist, what would you like God to tell you after you die?
After I die, I I whether I was been a good girl,
Yeah.
it's really fun.
Oh, good. Do evil people exist, or does evil use people as a vehicle?
I don't think evil people exist. I don't know that there's such an entity as evil. I don't know if
Yeah.
evil is the concept. I think a lot of people do terrible things. The things they do are bad, but evil, as a force, I'm just not sure.
Right. That's good. So this question deals with enemies. The basic question is, how do you advise someone to deal with an enemy? But first, I'm going to set it up with a few modern thinkers' thoughts. Alan Watts says, if you acknowledge your enemy, you empower them. Coppola stole from the mob and the samurais. Keep your friends close and your enemies closer. JFK said, forgive your enemy, but don't forget their name. And Fellini says, I need an enemy. So it's a lot of thoughts, but the basic question is, how do you advise someone to deal with an enemy? But first, how would you respond to Alan Watts? If you acknowledge your enemy, you empower them.
Yeah, I don't think I agree with that. I think I go with more the people who say keep them close, remember their name. I think it's good to acknowledge what really exists, not just ignore it.
Yeah. And then how do you deal with an enemy besides that? Any
Yeah, I don't know, just not let them destroy you.
Yeah.
Whatever that means, whatever.
Right. Well, it's a complicated thing. James Joyce was the first projectionist in Dublin. He had a cinema called Volta Cinema. He basically checked out. He said, this is stupid. Why should I go inside a building and see a movie of a tree when I can go outside and see a real tree? Years later, Faulkner said, sometimes the best fiction is more true than journalism. Why do we have to recreate things in order to get them? Why do we have to go to a theatrical play of people acting out life? Why don't we just live life?
Yeah, that's interesting. But we have a need to do it. The artist has a need to do that, to express that. And it preserves it. It preserves whatever's there. And we all have different reactions to those things. So you see a tree differently than I do.
Yeah. I love that word preserve. When health foods were first coming into like popularity in the 60s and early 70s. We told my dad, Dad, don't eat that. It has preservatives in it. And he goes, I need all the preservatives
Oh,
I can get.
horrible.
So what first attracted you to writing poetry yourself?
Well, again, I remember that I wrote a poem before I knew how to write, and my mother wrote it down for. She read poetry to me. She read Robert Louis Stevenson. You remember him?
Yes.
So I knew what poetry was, and I liked it, and I wanted to do it. And I
Wow. So it
did.
came from more an oral tradition than a
Yes,
written tradition for you.
yes,
Yeah.
yes,
But then you started writing it and you've studied it, or
yes.
you've appreciated poetry. What's the function of poetry?
Oh, I love that question. Because you always hear what's the definition of poetry, but what's the function of poetry? I think, and I have a fellow poet friend who thinks the same. The function of poetry is for the poet to learn about himself or herself and express his or her feelings. I think it's really less about communication with another. I think what drives a poet to write is just needing to look at that and get it out.
Wow, that's heavy because, I've studied some of these poets, what they, um, Gary Snyder, the beat poet who's
Mhm.
still alive, he said, my task as a poet entails the work of seeing the world without language, then bringing that seeing into language.
Oh, it's lovely.
Yeah.
Lovely.
But I think what you touched on was more like Leo Bersani's study of Mallarmé, the symbolist poet. The very crisis which threatens the writing of poetry sustains poetic composition. Which what that means to me is, I don't know what you can interpret it, is that if you're going to try to write a poem, that is the poem right there.
Oh,
That
that's,
you're putting
yeah, right. The effort.
the
Yeah.
effort. Yeah. But
So,
that goes back to this question is a screenwriting teacher right there in Ann Arbor, Michigan, near you, told me that great art or great poem or great film is when you can clearly see the intention of the maker. Then Stanley Kubrick says, no, great art or great film is when you can clearly not see the intention of the maker. What role does intention play in your creative process?
well, it's a start, but things veer off of that path. I rarely would say, gee, I feel like writing a poem today. Never, never. People ask you to write things for an occasion. That doesn't work for me. I have to focus on something. Often it could be like a word, just a couple of words.
Yeah. Interesting. So, um, Duchamp, the artist, said that there's no art without an audience. Do you think of your reader when you're writing the poem?
A little bit, in my daydreams, because I don't always have a reader, and that I've learned to be okay with that. But it's
Yeah.
more about really saying exactly what I mean. I'm happy if I've said what I mean. That's hard to do.
Yeah. That's good. Yeah. Because the other question I've been asking recently too is the cliche is that the journey is more important than the destination. The process or the making is
Right.
more important than the product. Then why do we have to even name a destination if the journey's more important?
Right. Aren't you tired of that? That's become such a cult thing. Like you're on it. It's the journey, like the
Yeah.
cancer journey or and I don't know. I guess really maybe the journey, maybe everything is a journey. Maybe you never get to the destination. So
Yeah.
maybe it's true.
It's interesting because the flaneurs, people in Paris in the 20s, they just sat at coffee houses and
Yeah.
drank coffee and wandered aimlessly. And look at what they did. They changed the world.
That's so true. Yeah. But
Yeah.
yoga thing, you know, you're always practicing.
Are you do you practice yoga?
I do. Yeah.
How many years you been doing yoga?
Probably, I don't know, 15, 20. And
Yeah.
I do it very modified now, but it's still yoga.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't understand why yoga isn't used in all workplaces. Because they
Yeah.
give you like a coffee break, they should give you a yoga break because it would increase your productivity. It's just being in touch with your breathing. There's so many
Yeah.
important things I've
Exactly.
learned from it.
Yeah, good.
I just wish I did it more than once a week.
I know. Well, you might someday.
So McLuhan had an interesting idea, percept, more question is how our inventions extend us. So like clothing extends our skin, knife and fork extends our teeth. Like the shutter in a camera or projection is an extension of our eyelid. What do you think the writing utensil extends for you? What humanness, or he would actually call it human sensorium. So back to your first answer about what's your favorite form of information is senses, the senses. So it's not necessarily just the sense, but whether you're using a typewriter or a pencil, what do you think the writing utensil extends for you?
Yeah, I think it matters a lot. And I've read this about other writers that they only write on such and such a thing. I like to use a pencil. I like the tactile feeling of a pencil. I make myself do other kinds of writing, but there's nothing like a pencil on a yellow legal pad.
Totally agree. I love it. I've got so many legal pads filled. But what do you think that pencil extends? What humanness or sensorium is it extending?
Well, the touch is obvious, but I don't know. It's a visual thing too.
Yeah.
You see it, the pencil itself, and you see it writing, and there's just something about maybe because it's almost like drawing too. You're kind of so it's very visual.
That's good. So you're saying it extends touch and sight.
I think so. You know, you
Yeah.
can smell. What about a graphite pencil?
It extends smell too, definitely. I mean, I always rave about the smell of a used bookstore.
Oh yeah,
That is like precious smell for me. I go into a used bookstore about 3 times a week.
nice. That's yoga for you.
It is yoga for me. Bookstores are yoga, definitely. And I don't know if you have these in your neighborhood now. They have these little libraries where
Yeah,
people put the books.
yeah.
Those are just like, since COVID closed, I used to use my local library as my office and go in there every day. I've really missed it for a year, not being able to go into a
Right,
library.
right.
So I talked to this filmmaker, Michael Apted, about 35 years ago. He made Coal Miner's Daughter, and he was making a documentary on a Russian rock star. His name's Michael Apted. And I said, why do rock video editors feel so obliged to edit fast? So when MTV came in about 35 years ago, the editing pace sped up. And he said, because we've learned to take in information faster. And I thought, well, can we really learn to take in information faster? Or are we just brainwashed to believe we can? So that's the basic question. What do you think?
I think I've read that we're not taking it in. It's like multitasking, that doesn't really exist. You just
Yeah,
fail or at each task. So, although you see these kids, they do take in, but it's because they're kids.
yeah. Yeah, you wonder if the quality of the information coming in is suffers a little, or they're seeing the big picture better. It could be a combination of both.
I think so.
But you're a mother, you've had kids. A lot of people say women multitask,
It's,
they can.
I think it's true. Don't you think it's true that our brains are
Well,
that?
I think you have to, because you can,
Right,
cook food and
right.
watch the kid and everything. So how many children did you have?
3.
And what did you learn from raising 3 children? What was the main, like, But tell me like a little what you learned from that.
You know, it's just extremely gratifying because they're all really wonderful adults now. So I feel like I've done my bit on earth. If I, you know, even if I never write another poem, I've got these wonderful people that I made, you know, with help. So,
That's
so
pretty good. You literally made them. That's true. But I
yeah,
mean, it's challenging. We both come from an era like, Dr. Spock was writing these books, How to Raise Kids, and kids don't come with instruction manuals. I mean, what was the challenge what was the biggest challenge that benefited from overcoming in the long run, or one of them?
yeah, I hope I overcame them. But I mean, I feel I could have been a stronger disciplinarian, maybe. Looking back, and they tell me now, you know, you never. My daughter was telling me like when she was an adolescent, she was suicidal, and I said, "Oh, I didn't know that." You know, where was I? So that kind of thing. I could have been maybe more attentive, but I had three kids, and they were 2 years apart, and I was working much of that time. So I would have liked to have been maybe more attentive.
Wow, that's heavy. So, yeah,
Yeah,
but you don't know if she wasn't revealing those feelings or you weren't attentive to all that. I mean, that's
I,
an amazing phenomenon. Yeah. But you've been married for over 60 years, is that right?
right. It's almost
How do you how do you explain the longevity?
everybody asks that. Well, you know, they're the silly answers like, well, we just didn't get divorced. We got married very young, obviously. So we kind of grew up together. We complement each other. We're totally opposite in every way. We just love each other a whole lot.
Yeah. What do you think's the most significant difference between women and men, physical aside?
Yeah, I think much of that is cultural. I really, this whole thing of Venus and Mars, I don't buy that. Um, do you ever read Camille Paglia or
Definitely.
yeah,
I
okay.
studied her a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, I liked her a lot. And she has that whole theory of the difference, and I'm just not sure I buy it.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
we, you
She's
know,
a deep thinker, but she does, yeah. And it's an interesting phenomenon on how people answer that question, because sometimes they go, there is no difference.
hmm
That if you're going to take the physical aside, that women and men are the same. But the cliche answer, which is rooted in some truth, I would say, is that women are more attentive to their feeling
hmm
and they get it out of their system, and men hold it in and are linear, and that's what has the impact on the next question is why do women live longer than men?
I don't think that's necessarily true anymore, is it? It's changing, I think.
Yeah, but I
So,
mean, just in general,
well,
it was sort of true, let's
right.
say.
I think culturally, maybe we take better care of ourselves. Maybe
Yeah,
we're usually the ones who worry about the proper diet and so on. But I think that's just changing so much.
yeah. Well, how about stress? They say
Yeah.
sometimes men are more stressful than women. Do you think that's true?
Men are more stressed,
Yeah.
less able to deal with stress. I think it
Yep.
has been true, but I just think these things are changing. There's so much written about it now. I think men are more
Yeah.
into it.
Yeah.
And the whole thing of gender identity, you know, it's like I have friends who say, well, there's no such thing as gender, you know, which I don't go that far,
Yeah.
but everything's people's thinking is changing.
It's changing, definitely. So, what do you think the motive of the cave artist was? Again, not your study, if you studied anthropologists or what Werner Herzog says in a documentary, but just your hunch. Why do you think, what was the motive?
Maybe it was communication, like, look, there's this kind of animal out there. Watch out.
Yeah.
Maybe it was a drive to create art, but I would guess more like communication.
Yeah. Yeah.
We've
It's interesting. Where is that drive to create art come in? If it's not, if they're there doing the animal drawings on the caves to like, communicate this is how you get the animal, or this is that we want to conjure up the the presence of the animal, then when does it flip over to being, you know,
That's interesting. At some point, maybe this person thought, oh, that looks pretty good. Maybe if I add another squiggle over here, it'll look even better. That's interesting.
yeah, it's like one of McLuhan's favorite lines is, the Balinese have no word for art. They do everything as well as they can.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Isn't it amazing? Because, you know, that's sort of how kids create art. They don't make art because they know it's going to end up on the refrigerator door art gallery. They're just making it, you know.
Yeah, nice.
In general, Jane, what do you think? What's more important, conviction or compromise?
Ooh, that's hard. I guess I would go with compromise, but I'm not sure. Because if you don't have convictions, well, that's not so. See how I don't have convictions on my own question.
Well, no, I was going to say my joke is always, you know, there's no right or wrong answers to these questions, but that one, I always am fishing for them to say compromise, but 80 to 90% say conviction.
Okay.
Because I think it's like how you're raised is that, you know, most of us, I don't know if it's Americans or worldwide, are raised with this thing called the work ethic.
Right.
So where do you think you got your work ethic from?
Well, maybe from my husband, because my father didn't have a heck of a work ethic. He just wanted to paint and draw. He was in this business he didn't want to be in. My mother worked hard, like housework. But I don't know about a work ethic, you know, but my husband, God bless him, has a wonderful work ethic. I think
Where do you,
I've learned so much from him.
that's beautiful. Where do you think he got his work
His
ethic?
father
Yeah.
came over from the old country. He delivered ice and created a wonderful business, and you know, absolutely strong work
Yeah.
ethic, values. Yeah.
Because I've tried to study work ethic a lot because most people say they got it from their parents. And if you look up work ethic in Wikipedia, about the third paragraph down, it says, this could be a scam by consumer capitalism to get you to go to work.
I love that. Right.
But it is, there's something human. It's back to your probing the word survival. I mean, work ethic and survival are pretty close. You know,
Yeah.
if you don't do this, you might not survive. So, you know, and then how much are people driven? You know, some people are so driven to work that they forget how to relax.
Right. And they're
You
not
know,
doing art all the time like the Balinese.
yeah. And like your dad being a painter, a fisher, an outdoorsman, and a business person. You
Yeah.
know, he
Yeah.
knew, seems as though he knew how to balance so he'd
Yeah.
have a little slack and not be overstressed.
Very much so. Yeah.
So, in your accomplishments of your life, how do you rate these three elements? What played the biggest role, second and third? Luck, skill, and ambition.
Oh, luck, definitely. Luck and skill both come over ambition. I don't think I was ever really ambitious.
Yeah,
So combination of luck and skill.
yeah, that's good. And so, back to poetry, T.S. Eliot said that poetry is outing your inner dialogue.
Yeah.
What language is your inner dialogue in?
English. Sometimes it's in a little Joyce and Finnegan's Wake stuff, you know.
Oh, that's
Mostly
great.
English.
Yeah,
Some
it's Finneganese, we call it. Yeah,
Finnegan. Yeah.
Finneganese. But what form is your inner consciousness in?
Um, since I've been doing a lot of yoga, it's in observing, being curious and observing about my own feelings and thoughts.
Yeah, that's good. Do you think artists have a moral obligation?
I think everybody has a moral obligation. So yes.
Yeah. That's interesting because that's a new question I've just added because the second part was, do the consumers of art or the yeah, the consumers of art have a moral obligation?
Um, yeah, I think to give the art a chance, you know,
Yeah.
yeah, to maybe work at it if it doesn't come easily.
Yeah. But I think it's an interesting paradox how a lot of our great artists were talking about their failings and sort of hoiking up their weaknesses. And so is that like, again, how much is that increasing those weaknesses and strengths? It's sort of like that Alan Watts thing. If you acknowledge, you empower it, maybe. But
Mm.
again, you said that's not so much true, or it didn't ring true for you. But it's like if people, I don't know, maybe struggling with Hemingway. I didn't read him much, but I know the big 4-hour documentary on Hemingway revealed a lot of his weaknesses and failings, and that played a part in his writing. So is he sort of obligated to engage all of him into his writing, or sort of, you know, in sort of express goodness? You know what I'm trying.
Well, are you saying that he has to be a good person in order to produce good art?
No, not that so much as, does he have a moral obligation not to write from his weaknesses?
I no, I don't like to see limitations like that put on
Mm.
an artist.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting also, it's like violence in films. I do not like violent films, but are they just reflecting society so that we can look at them and make our decision? Or indeed, are they increasing our need to be violent, or our
Yeah.
tendency to be violent? We can't tell that, but any thoughts on that?
Well, yeah, that brings into focus what you asked about moral obligation, because does the filmmaker have an obligation not to bring violence into society? Well, yeah, I'd have to say yes.
Yeah.
And yet you don't want to limit creativity. I guess there's somewhere a blurry line between art and bad stuff. You know,
Right.
Also, you know what
That's
I mean.
like yeah, no, it's something I've been thinking about more because, like, John Waters, the filmmaker, has made a lot of gross films. He's a great filmmaker, but he said he cheered the Wicked Witch of the West in watching The Wizard of Oz. And it didn't make him a bad person, but
Mhm.
he cheered for the bad person in the film. So they felt, in creating the film, they're going to have a good and bad force, and then we're going to probably have the commonality of rooting for the good person,
Mhm.
you know. So that
I was just going to say that there are always more interesting characters. The bad people are usually more interesting, right?
yeah.
I
But
don't.
does that indeed increase badness in the world?
Well, maybe it does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is perception reality?
Oh, that's what they say. A lot of people say that. Um, Maybe it is.
Yeah.
I'll go with maybe.
Maybe's a good answer, Jane. Thank you.
Just say-
I like for sure maybe. Definitely maybe. So McLuhan probed Finnegan's Wake by James Joyce, that artists dream awake, that everyone has this ability to create these amazing scenarios while they're asleep in the middle of the night. But artists also use that to dream while they're awake. So have dreams played a role in your creative process?
Yeah, very much so. I've written poems that occurred to me in dreams, occasionally. Yeah. I think so. Or you know what? I'll be saying a poem to myself as I'm falling asleep, and I think it's really wonderful. But then, and I've tried keeping a pencil and paper by my bed, but I don't usually do anything with it. And then a lot of times those things are terrible when you wake up too.
Interesting. So what do you think the function of dreaming is?
Yeah, they say that you need to dream to be mentally well. Um, I think a lot of it is review. I look at my dreams when I remember them the next day as kind of like a measurement of how my mental health and attitude is. I can pretty much tell, oh, this, I'm upset about this, or I'm thinking about this, because I think I'm pretty good at analyzing them.
That's good. Yeah, Jean Cocteau has a great quote about dreams. I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. It says, "It's a filmmaker's privilege to be able to allow a large number of people to dream the same dream together, and to show us, moreover, the optical illusions of unreality with a rigor of realism."
Wow.
I mean, I often describe Finnegan's Wake as what indigenous American Indians do. They go from tent to tent in the morning, and they ask each other, "Well, what did you dream about?"
Nice.
And then they help co-create the dream by the questions they ask the dreamer. And I think that's what we're the co-creators of Finnegan's Wake, of what we put into it.
I think so too.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, tell us the process, how you got to Finnegan's Wake. You've been reading it for 15 years. What sort of led you to it?
Yeah. Well, I had read in the rest of Joyce and loved it. And really, when I was in college, I think I talked to you about this. I saw a production of Finnegan's Wake for the theater by Mary Manning.
Yes.
I just loved it. It's understandable. It's beautiful. I saw it live on the stage, and then I bought the book so I could read the words on the page too. And it was the washerwomen scene, that
Yep.
what alone. And that's got to be one of the most beautiful passages, and I just loved it. Then I tried to read it alone on my own and didn't get too far. And then I had developed a group of friends through the Ulysses class that I took, and they were doing it. They had been doing it before, and they invited me, and here I am.
And so was that Bill Kennedy?
Bill wasn't quite in the group at that point. There was a wonderful woman who has passed away who led this group. Her name was Marjorie Johnson. She was married to Jim Johnson, I think was his name, who was a quite well-known artist. But anyway, she taught Ulysses, and we did it at her house. And everybody would have a little sip of Jameson's first, and it was a ritual, beautiful ritual. We had the annotations, and we would read it and go around, and then we continued at her house. Bill came in, and he has so much to give,
Right.
so he pretty much started leading the group, and there's been changes in personnel over the years, so the character changes, but it's just wonderful.
Wow. So that's
Yeah.
pretty good. So
Yeah.
this, what do you think was Joyce's motive in writing Finnegan's Wake?
I think he wanted to show, for one thing, that we're all the same. He involves all these different languages, different countries, humanity of mankind. And then I think he loved the words and then the music, and he just enjoyed it. And he heard all that in his head and took so much pleasure in it that it was play. I think it was play for him. Don't you think?
I think that's the key word. Play is such an important word. It's just like music. You don't work music, you play music.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
So what do you think the function of music is?
Oh, so again, I'd go to the creator, the musician, a need to express, but it also, you remember how Plato said you couldn't play music because it would stir people up too much or something? I mean, it has such an effect on us, an effect on our lives, and pleasure, beauty. I don't know, I feel like we need it.
Yes. Yeah, that new movie I highly recommend, Summer of Soul. You know, it's
Oh,
the
do yeah.
the Black Woodstock. I mean, you get Nina Simone, Stevie Wonder, all these amazing groups, BB King, and it's amazing. And Mahalia Jackson does a duet with Mavis Staples,
Ooh.
and you get Oh Happy Day. So you really get the, let's stay on music for a second because I've studied this a lot. And this idea that my friend says there's 3 T's to music: technique, theory, and taste. So technique is, you can learn how to play an instrument. Theory is you can know what you're doing with notes. But taste, how does one acquire taste?
Oh, I guess listening a lot to other people, I think.
Yeah.
Listening.
And then I know you mentioned you like jazz. Thelonious Monk said there are no wrong notes.
Nice.
Agree or disagree?
Oh, I like it. I like agree with it. Then you never make a mistake, right?
Right.
I love him.
Yeah. What's more fundamental, music or language?
Oh, I'm gonna say music because you can, la la la, babies babble. I think music probably comes first.
Yeah. And do you think that language is more innate in humans or more invented by humans?
I think it's innate.
Yeah.
Innate.
Yeah. Lewis Carroll said, I believe as many as 6 impossible things before breakfast. Have you believed in any impossible things lately?
Lately,
Yeah.
not really. As a child, maybe.
What did you believe as a child?
Fairies. Duh.
Oh, you
Yeah,
believed in fairies. That's great.
absolutely. Well, maybe I'm not so sure. I don't still a little bit.
Yeah. One of our wake people, who comes to the Venice Wake, he hasn't come to Sweeney's yet, and he should because he's from Ireland.
Oh,
Peter, he was a urban planner in Dublin,
oh,
and he worked a shirt and a tie job and went to an office. And one day his boss said, "Oh, you're going to have to design a road and go around this field." And he says, "Well, why?" He says, "Because there's pukas in that field." And I was like, he couldn't dispute it. He goes, "Oh, okay." And some people listening might not know that pukas are like fairies or leprechauns. We can't prove maybe they exist, but we can,
yeah. My little granddaughter, when she was, I don't know, 6, she had all these stuffed animals. She said, "You don't know that they can't talk."
Yeah, the certainty of children is good.
Yeah.
So your whole creative approach to life, you've done this well for many years. Tell me one major element that's changed and one major element that stayed the same.
Changed is I don't feel I need to get better at anything I do. I'm okay with whatever I do. It's just for me and just for play and for fun. And something, what was the other one? Something that hasn't changed.
Yeah, that's remained the same.
Yeah. Really, like my drawing is the same. I draw the same. My writing is pretty much the same.
Yeah.
So,
And you wrote a child's book?
I did. Yeah. I've
And
written
what?
a couple, one got published.
Great. And just tell us a little, how'd you approach that? Did you go, oh, this is easy? Because, my friends are real successful children books writers, and they always say, it's not easy. It seems as though it's a very easy thing. What
There,
was the challenge and how did you feel
yeah,
about the whole
it's
project?
very hard to get them published. And my father did illustrations that I used when I submitted it to be published. And I think his illustrations sold it, but then they didn't use them. But I think it filled a need at the time. It was called Why Does the Tiger Have Stripes? And it was about environment, animals blending in with their environment. It was short, it was in rhyme, and I got published by a firm that no longer exists, I think, but it sold books to schools. So it was educational.
Yeah, very good. Because it was probably the time when we became aware of environmental concerns was Silent Spring by Rachel Carson.
That was it. Yeah.
Amazing book. Thank
Right.
God that she did what she did. Moshe Feldenkrais works with healing and movement. He says it's literally possible to identify a weakness and incorporate it to become a strength rather than we're taught to overcome a weakness. Tell me a weakness that you've turned into a strength.
Oh, well, physically, I'd say, because as I'm aging, I've had a lot of trouble with my back and joints and stuff. And so I think I've learned to be more perceptive and aware and work with them, which makes me more perceptive in my movement and in how I live in general. That's the best I can come up with.
That was good, Jane. Believe me, that's what we should all do is flip those rejections into redirections. It was a good example. Yeah, the American Indians, indigenous cultures, Eastern philosophy respect their elders. Can you explain Western culture's disdain for old age?
I think part of it is fear, but I think because we have such an emphasis on beauty and looks, and abilities, but beauty mostly, that I think that's really what deters us. And I think younger people have a fear of having to care for their elders, take on that responsibility, because it hasn't been inculcated into us that that's a wonderful thing to be able to do. So we have a long way to go.
Yeah, it really changed because, I mean, a lot of cultures, the elders live in the home. And then
Yeah.
this philosophy of putting your parents into elder homes was like devastating for baby boomers. Just like, what? It was just like, it's a real challenge. Fill in the blank. Anger can be a productive emotion when
When it enables you to clear your head and free your feelings and express yourself. I'm not so sure I like that answer. I'm not so sure anger is really productive.
Well, listen to this, Jane. You really helped me because I'm always trying to rethink the wording on questions.
Oh,
And, I'm always open to new questions and, um, you know, collecting questions for 40 years. I've come up with a lot of cute, fun questions, but it's like, it's more so how you word it. So I used to say, can anger be a productive emotion? And they could simply go yes or no.
yeah, that's not good. Yeah.
And my wife's dad, who's a social worker, a great guy, and he said, well, you should change that one to anger can be a productive emotion when, and it enables them to try to flush it out. And you're like the second person since I changed it to go, no, anger is not a productive emotion, because we know that all emotions can be productive or not productive. But it is, can we literally take a deep breath and realize, look, and if I raise my voice and become angry, I'm going to lose immediately. I mean, that's usually what happens. Anger like shuts the communication down. But it might be productive if, we want to change laws or rules.
That's true. Yeah.
Who knows? I mean, it's hard to really calculate. It's what's called causality. We think as humans, we can figure out what a cause is and the effect. But in the big picture, you can't completely. You can suss out patterns, but you can't really say this caused this, period. It's not,
Right.
there's not like just one thing. How do you find peace of mind?
Um, Different music sometimes meditation, sometimes being alone, sometimes being with someone.
Yeah. Being alone is an amazing thing. You know, this Pascal quote, he says, all of humanity's problems stem from our inability to sit quietly in a room alone.
It's so nice.
But how does one acquire that? I mean, it sounds idealistic, but I mean, you said sit in silence. How do you do it?
Practice. It's a practice. It's a
Yeah.
meditation practice. And it's
Yeah.
not obscure. It's easy when you learn how and do it.
Yeah. Amazing. That's good. Yeah, I always have a problem like, okay, now I'm going to sit and not think about anything. I'm going to think about not thinking.
Right, right. That's so
Yeah.
normal.
But
Everybody has that problem.
do you have any hints on how to meditate successfully?
Breathe, concentrate on your breathing. That's so basic. It's trite, but
Yeah.
it's helpful.
Yeah.
And body scans,
What's body scan mean?
where you focus on each part of your body, usually going from your skull downward, and you don't try to change anything. You just feel it and be aware of what's going on in that body part systematically down through your body. It's a good way to start.
So you're saying in your mind's eye or what?
Yes, yes.
In
You're
your
sitting
mind.
still. You're physically sitting still,
Yeah.
but in your mind's eye, you think about your skull, your ears, your jaw. Are you carrying tension in your jaw, your shoulders, right on down, without
Yeah.
judging whether that's good or bad. Without
That's really good. My sister taught me that exercise where you rotate your jaw all around, and it's so good. And now our dance teacher tells us to do that. And it's like, you don't think of that during the day.
No, that's good.
On what occasion do you lie?
Oh, if I don't want to hurt somebody's feelings.
Now, I got that question from Marcel Proust. You know, the last page of every Vanity Fair magazine, they do the Proust questionnaire. And I know you mentioned Proust. What's your attraction to Proust, or what have you gotten from reading Proust?
You just soak up those long sentences. They're so beautiful. And his whole concept of time. Does time exist? How do you bring time back? I had a reading group with this same woman who started me on Finnegan's Wake. We had a reading group on Proust, and each of us had a different translation, and she would do the French. And it's beautiful. It's gorgeous. The images, that whole concept of how he brings everything back to his mind from that one little cookie. I love it.
Yeah. Isn't literature amazing? It's so amazing that Sweeney's is a little pharmacy in Dublin, and they can, because of COVID, get this gathering on Zoom from people all over the world, and it's not overwhelming. What is there, like 5 to 8 or 12 of us?
Yep.
I mean, it's really an amazing thing, all because of a book.
Right. And because of the virus.
Exactly. That's flip a breakdown into a breakthrough at the best. But it's also like, I would never read Dante. I didn't have any interest in Duncan just said, well, check this out. And now, I mean, it's still over my head, but it's the group it's
fabulous.
And we have a Carl Jung group. If you ever want to join us there, that is amazing too.
Really?
It's like, yeah, but it is, once we get in the discussion, it's like a group therapy, and it's just amazing. Yeah. So, Jane, if you were walking down the street today and you met yourself as a 12-year-old, what would you say to your 12-year-old self?
Stand up straight.
Which way should toilet paper come off the roll, over or under?
Over.
And why?
I like it that way.
Well, you like it the way the person who invented the patent on toilet paper rolls invented it with the toilet paper roll going over. So there you go. If a publisher was to release your autobiography off the top of your head, what would the title be?
That's so funny because I did think of a title if I had a book of poetry, and the title was Obviously.
Oh, nice. That's a great word. And then they want to scent the glue in the binding of the book. What smell would it be?
Cinnamon.
Oh, great. And if the, say it again.
I said, this is fun.
Oh, good. That's what the whole purpose is. Some people take it too serious, but it's all about having fun and mix and match. So if a statue was built in your honor, where would you want it displayed and what would it be made of?
Oh my Lord, a statue. I feel like it should be marble. And where would I want it displayed? I just don't really want a statue made of me. In the woods.
In the woods. Very good. I do get that answer sometimes. I don't want a statue.
No, I don't.
Yeah. If you were a chair, who would you want to sit on you?
Oh my. Oh, well, some little child.
Oh, that is beautiful. These are 5 Alan Watts questions, really brief, just off the top of your heads, like 3 to 5 word or brief answers. Who started it all?
God.
Are we going to make it?
No.
Where do we put it?
Wherever we want to.
Who's cleaning it up?
Nobody.
Is it serious?
No.
Wow, really good. Are the laws of nature cruel?
Yes.
Wow. If you were the ruler of the world, what would you do on your first day?
Oh. Well, it would have to be something to do for the environment. What could you even do? You know, pass a lot of laws, and then how could you enforce them? I don't know.
Jane, what's the difference between rights and responsibilities?
Rights, I guess we're entitled to. Responsibilities are things we need to do in order to protect our rights.
Nice. What's the difference between rebellion and revolution?
I think rebellion is more short-term. Revolution, I think, is more about a long-term change that really changes things. Rebellion would be more like an individual act.
Yeah, like re-evolution, revolution.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's evolving.
Yeah.
The great political folk singer Utah Phillips says, anarchy is making rules for yourself, not others. Who is entitled to make the rules?
I think the group, society together.
Yeah. Can we think without language?
I don't think I can. No, otherwise I think it becomes feeling.
Right. Isn't that amazing? This question, well, first of all, do you, if you had a vote for the death penalty, would you say for or against it?
Against.
So this question entails, what do we do? Does punishment work? I'll just set it up with this. It's sort of like what Gregory Bateson said about the double bind. Don't pay no attention that I'm lying to you. So does a criminal when they get caught, do they think, oh, I'm doing something morally and socially wrong? Or they just think my criminal skills weren't up to snuff that day. So how do we deal with that kind of law breaking, and does punishment work?
Well, I think it can work somewhat as a deterrent, but clearly it's not working as well as it should.
Yeah.
Um, and I don't know how to deal. Well, I think education and more equitable early life maybe would help. Sure,
Yeah.
need that anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, people always turn to education. Now you were in the healthcare world.
Yeah,
In
right.
what capacity? Was it education or
I different capacities, education and then and administrative capacities, and I had some counseling jobs.
well, your observation of education, you went through the system, your kids go through the system, now your grandkids are going through
Yeah.
education. What would what do you think the American education system excels at, and how would you like it changed? Or what's something you think could be better?
Yeah, I just don't know because I'm nostalgic for a more classical education. I don't know if that's appropriate now. I think it's maybe just nostalgia because there's so much focus on what what they call the SEL, social and emotional, and I forget what the L is. And I think the schools are being asked to do a lot of things that used to be done in the home. It's a big quandary for me, really. My son,
Yeah.
so he's a high school teacher, so it's something we think about and talk about. I don't really have an answer.
Does your son like teaching high school, or is it
He
really tough?
loves. He's just like a born teacher. He loves his
He
students.
loves it.
Yeah, yeah. He just wrote. I just have to tell you, in the summer, he spent his time writing. He teaches psychology. He wrote a book of humorists about psychology called Psychology for Better or Verse. It's all in verse, and it's a very irreverent book, but it teaches the subject. And if people could teach in that way so that they can really get the kids' attention, he makes it very personal. He did another course that was called, in his American history course, called In Your Life. He did the last 18 years of this country because these kids were 18 years old. So he took every year of their lives and did what was going on in music and politics and so on. So if you make it personal and they can relate to it.
Oh, that's amazing. You taught me a lot. So do you think is this in high school? Oh, he's a high school teacher.
He's a high school teacher.
Oh, that's amazing. Yeah. Because you'd think high school teachers are almost like babysitters for cell phone users, you know.
No, his kids love him. They bring him presents. He has them over for dinner.
Nice. Because there's another thing that we weren't taught. And then I was talking to someone and they go, oh no, now they teach it is conflict resolution.
Right. I don't know. All this kind of, so-called soft stuff, I think it's needed, but why isn't it in the home? So that's a more basic problem. I guess the teachers have to pick up the slack.
Right. So you're saying when we were growing up, we learned conflict resolution in the home,
Yeah.
but
Right.
now they should teach it in school. I know. I was amazed. This woman says, "Oh no, they teach conflict resolution in
Right.
schools now."
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the major problems because it's just like, how do we stop our governments from going to war?
Yeah. Right.
How would you answer that?
I just don't know because you want to say elect the right people, but how do you know who's right? And then they change, and I just don't know.
It's
And
it's
maybe sometimes we need to go to war. I don't know. I don't
that
think so, but maybe we do.
that's how we were raised. Like, my dad fought in World War II because he believed that he was doing the right thing,
Right.
And I'm always like, the great flip was when he was babysitting my sister's son so that the mom and dad could go march in the anti-war movement.
Yeah.
And,
Wow.
and my dad was like, okay, I'll babysit while you go. Like, that was a good, he understood because one moment in his life, he he raised me a Roman Catholic. Him and my mom raised us all Roman Catholics. And he said, he saw war, in Europe and experienced it. And he said, I can't believe that there's a God that would let me see these atrocities of war in front of me.
Right.
But he didn't really say, I stopped believing in God or whatever. He was still, but it was his way to question, is this,
Yeah.
where's that, like you said, conundrum or paradox, it's like so easy to surrender to, like, oh, there's a higher power and I want to have faith and belief in them, but are they allowing this to happen? Or I got to revert to Frank Zappa. He says, if we're made in God's likeness and we're dumb, then God's dumb.
Oh, that's nice.
And if we're ugly, then God must be ugly. We're beautiful and he's beautiful, but it's like, if this is true that we're made in God's likeness, then boy, he has a lot of human strengths and weaknesses.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
There's a book by an author named Jack Miles. I forget the name of it, but it's about God kind of growing and changing. Like God starts out just angry and he thinks, no, maybe I better be merciful. Sort of like that.
Yeah. So I just have a few more, Jane. This has been really fun, and then Clint's going to jump on and ask you one or two, and then this one is Joseph Boy's a great artist who actually wrote an extra chapter to Finnegan's Wake. Check him out. He's an amazing artist. He lived with wolves. He's a political artist from Austria, I think, or Germany. He said, make the secrets productive. Then Lou Welsh, who's a beat poet, he said, guard the secrets, constantly reveal them. But Thornton Wilder, who was totally enamored with Finnegan's Wake, in 1928, he said, art is confession. Art is the secret told. But art is not only the desire to tell one's secret, it's the desire to tell it and hide it at the same time.
Wow.
Isn't that amazing? So you've laid your cards on the table for 80 minutes. I'm not insinuating you haven't answered this, but Jane, what is it really all about for you?
Oh, moment by moment, being mindful and awake and alive in every moment.
That is great. How do you do that, though?
Hard.
Yeah. Mindful and awake every moment. It's sort of like Ram Dass, be here now.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, being here in the moment. That's a beautiful thing.
That's enough.
Yes. It's a challenge. Okay, well, Clinton, I'm sure we're lucky. Clinton facilitates us and he listens. Thanks for being there, Clinton, and helping us out.
It's always a pleasure. Wonderful discussion you guys have just had. And one thing that struck me, you kind of got me going in a loop that I'm stuck in now. Because as Jerry said, he's always looking at feedback for questions. So when he asked you, Jane, about whether the artists, what was the exact question? I wrote it down here. Hold on. Do artists have a moral obligation?
Yeah.
And you say, well, everyone has a moral obligation. So I was going to say, well, Jerry, maybe if you ask the questions like, do artists have a particular moral obligation, or is there an obligation for the art? But then I thought about that quote that McLuhan says that Jerry quote about the Balinese don't have any art. They try to do everything as well as possible. So if they don't have art, or that sort of means everything is art, then now I'm not sure if art. So maybe you, okay, you see the loop I'm stuck in here.
Like, does art exist then? What's art? Right.
Yeah. I suppose that's yeah. What do you think, Jane?
Yeah. So maybe if you live like that and everything is art, then if you're creating something, it has a function in addition to being art. Does that make sense? Probably
Mhm.
not.
No,
Yeah, no,
no.
that's good. Yeah. It
So
has
so
enough
I mean,
fun.
if
Go
everything
ahead.
i- if everything we do is art, then there's lots of people who are slacking at that job.
You're right. That's right. Yeah.
Hmm.
Well,
That
well,
that again is also making a value judgment on art, and it's who's determining what art is. But I think it's interesting, Clinton. Sorry to jump in, but it's like the Balinese have no word for art. They do everything as well as they can, meaning if they're cleaning their fish, that's art. If they're using the fish bones to make a sculpture, that's art. Whereas we normally in the West would say, well, no, the art is the sculpture. And we want to say, well, the art of cooking. But what Jane brought up was the function. And that's funny because what you said earlier, Jane, that really resonated with me is that when you wrote your first poem, you didn't use a pencil. You just said it. And so that was, Clinton, you know this better, the whole thing that McLuhan got from orality, oral and oral, like hearing and speaking. And, you know, the commonality Jane and I have is Finnegan's Wake.
Hmm.
It's a book you have to read out loud with a group of people. So we're turning an eye experience, looking at a book, into an ear experience.
mhm.
It's like Jane's one of the best. She reads and every syllable is pronounced correctly. And
Thank you.
like I was raised a idiot in front of a TV screen. And so, I learned how to read, but I fumble every probably 10th syllable. And even the best readers, this, Jane, even the best readers in Finnegan's Wake groups will flub little syllables. And it's almost makes you so much more tuned if you're paying really close attention to what's going on there. Instead, it's like Ulysses, you can hear that book read out loud and you don't need the text in front of you. But with the Wake, people don't realize you have to have the text in front of you, and you have to hear how people are mispronunciating each syllable because there is no correct way. But it seems as though there is. Go ahead, Jay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's that word for things that happen by, they happy accident?
Yeah.
I like to think that when people, it begins with an S.
Serendipitous.
Thank you. That when people are reading and they make a mistake, sometimes I love the mistakes even better. They're even better. And I think Joyce would have liked them.
Oh yeah, I totally agree. I think when the mistakes once I had a Finnegan's Wake reading club in Echo Park across town in Los Angeles, and this woman who came started making up her own new sentence. After I says, okay, everybody read 2 lines, and then she started making up her own. I says, Joyce would have loved that.
He would.
But Clinton, you tell us, what do you think the function of art is? Because wasn't that basically your question?
Right.
Yeah.
Um, it seems if everything is an art and it's a technique and so if we go with that really broad definition, then I'm not sure if that's useful or not. But then, for instance, the function of poetry, Jane, you answered it was largely about expression, or having something that you had to put into words and getting the words right so you could express it, right? It's sort of this therapeutic function, if that's maybe the right word.
Mhm.
And I'm wondering, like, therapy could be one of the reasons for art, a very important one. It's not necessarily the right. I'm not sure if it's always going to be a part of the process, I'm sure. Um, but when I'm working, I've got a very specific intention. Um, and I just write essays, and I do videos and whatnot. But it's sort of like what Jerry always says: reveal the secret while you continue to hide it. So I suppose what I'd like to do is I find other people who have already said some part of what I want to say, and then I find a way to bridge that in juxtaposition with someone else who said something else, and I have all these other people speak through their stories or their experiences or their views, and I string them all together to say something that I would be too terrified to say for myself. And then I say, oh, look at all these people saying that thing over there. That's interesting. When really it's me screaming out whatever it is that I'd be far too embarrassed to say on my right. Or if I were just to come out and say that, right? It's like, oh, look, that group over there, they might be onto something, right? And it might even be they're not even a group. There's the group that I assembled together from fragments of completely unrelated scenes, right?
Clint, that's exactly what Finnegan's Wake is.
I was just going to say that. Yeah.
Yeah. Joyce said, how did you write Finnegan's Wake? He says, I didn't write it. Those people at the coffee house, they wrote it.
Yeah.
So he just listened to shortwave radio in Paris in the 1920s and wrote it all down. But he was really good at being discerning, like you are, what clips you're going to use,
Right.
and juxtapose. That the funny story was, they go, how's the writing going, James Joyce? He goes, well, it's take me a week with these 12 words. And he goes, 12 words take you a week? He goes, yeah, I'm trying to get them in the right order.
Nice.
But Clinton, just briefly, we're going over time a little here, but what did Siegfried Gideon say the function of art was? So this was this big art historian that influenced McLuhan deeply. Do you know what he said the function of art was?
Right. Fusion of heart and mind. And the quickest example I can give is with industrialism, construction sort of forked away in its own direction away from architecture. And so architects who designed beautiful buildings got stuck in this endless neoclassical, unevolving quagmire of more and more ornamentation and flourish of using the techniques of construction. So they'd use new steel and new concrete to create a frame, which they then stick a rock or a classical veneer facade on top of to make it look like an old Greek classical building. So they weren't doing art properly, because construction was, we need to slap together this ugly building to build a factory, and we need it yesterday, and it's just a whole bunch of girders, and concrete and steel is ugly. And then architecture is, hey, look at this giant, beautiful building that hasn't changed for 300 years, and we just stuck more and more stuff on it, like a Napoleonic, flourishes, and it just gets gaudy and awful. And then the artist's job is to come along and, no, how do we make a building with steel and concrete that's beautiful?
Yeah.
We need to create new forms. How can steel be pretty? Oh, we're only using steel for ugly stuff, or we're using it for the scaffolding to slap on the old stuff, which isn't even constitutive anymore. And so what you end up with is, say, the Eiffel Tower. And Paris is tearing its hair out, half of it going, oh my God, look at this ugly monstrosity. And the other half is going, it's not so bad. I don't mind it, right? And they're having fights over whether or not to take it down or not, right? So that's what the artist does, is try and bring form and the constituent materials that the engineer comes up with, the mind, and merge it back with the heart and the aesthetics of beauty.
Really, really well put. That's what this whole time with you, Jane, has been, a fusion of the head and the heart. No, the heart and the mind. But just another quick sidey is Moholy-Nagy is what Siegfried Godfrey Gideon was talking about. And he drew, he's an amazing architect, designer, but he drew this illustration of a diagram explaining Finnegan's Wake.
Ooh.
You got to look it up. Look up Moholy Naji's diagram of Finnegan's Wake. It's gorgeous.
What is that?
And it,
MPGI, or how do you spell it?
Mahol, I'll send you a link to it, or
Okay.
we'll put it in the link. So yeah, Jane, we'll close up now. That was brilliant.
Fun.
Clinton, thank you so much for that art history lesson. And so just two closing questions here, Jane. What's the most healthy or impactful cultural shift you see developing today?
Environmental consciousness.
Yeah. Back to good old Rachel Carson writing Silent Spring in 1962.
Yeah.
So last question, Jane, it's been an honor and a pleasure. Thank you so much. The last question is, what gives you the most optimism?
Kids, little children.
Yeah. That's my most popular answer is the youth.
Mhm.
So thank you so much, Jane. It's been truly enlightening. Thank you, Clinton.
Thank you very much. I loved it. It was fun.